Chris, it's so nice to have you on the Bliss Republic podcast today. Thank you so much for accepting my offer to join this conversation. So, Chris is an international singer and songwriter. You have released some really beautiful albums and songs that we'll come to in a second. You are based in Toronto, in Canada. And thank you so much for being in the space with me today. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Such a wonderful way to meet and connect.
Yes, absolutely. So we connected on Instagram really randomly. I don't even know. I think you liked one of the posts that I created
Yes.
on a podcast.
Yes.
And then from there, we started just having a chat about that. And then we're like, this is what this podcast should be about, like genuinely connecting with strangers and still knowing that there's a oneness present and that we can all drop into that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful concept for a podcast. I love that.
Thank you. So you recently released a single called Receive.
Yes, I
Can
did.
you tell me what that's about, the song, and where the inspiration comes from?
Receive is what I would call like a music meditation. And it's a song that I wrote last year. It actually began with a little guitar riff that I started playing over a decade ago when I was living in California. And I never really finished it. It just kind of traveled with me over the many years, which happens. And then last year I was hosting these regular gatherings on Insight Timer, which is like a platform of meditators. And we would, it was like the context was these sacred concerts, essentially, these music medicine journeys that I was hosting, where we would get together and go on a journey, into the heart, and everyone would really just bring whatever they were navigating in their life. And I was going through a lot in my life. My mom was ill, and my mom since passed. And so it was a time when I was here living at my parents' place and taking care of my mom. And I would literally, say goodnight to her and then come, tune into the live stream some weeks on the Wednesday evening. And so I was always, looking for that song to open the gatherings, something to just bring us into presence, to connect us with our breath, with our body. And so somewhere in the flow of doing that weekly and just kind of tinkering with ideas of what I wanted to share, I started lyrics and the melodies for Receive. And that's how the song came together. And actually, I was in BC in August to record some new music. I had very little intentions of recording that song, actually. It was just something I'd been playing regularly, so I was messing around with it, and then it ended up coming to life. We recorded that and a couple of other songs. The other one is a song called Kind of Love, which I put out a month before. And so those are the two songs that we recorded in that last little round of sessions. Yeah.
I am a big fan of these two songs. I think they really go straight to the heart. There's some vibrational message in there that is very personal, you can tell, but so relatable as well to everyone. And what I find really unique about those two songs is that they're different from the mainstream songs in a way that the texts aren't approval seeking. They don't feel like you're trying to bring a certain message across, but the message is just there. Especially Kind of Love resonates a lot with me. I've been listening to it up and down in my car. And where exactly does the inspiration for that song come from?
Yeah. Well, I didn't even finish saying what I should have said about Receive, which was just to finish the thought. I think the essence of the song is to really support us in opening, to allow, whatever it is that we're calling in into our experience to actually land. And I think there's sort of this thing that I learned many, many years ago, which is that it's actually quite common that there are a lot of us, especially in the conscious spaces, healing spaces, it's easier to give than it is to receive in a lot of ways. There's a lot of healers and artists running on empty because they're giving, and they're not so good at receiving. And so, just going back to those gatherings, I think the intention of the song was really to support people in, naming what it is that they want to receive or welcome more of, or what's going to really fill their cup. and then letting go of whatever's in the way, whatever, limiting beliefs, doubts, insecurities, fears, or just even sometimes energetically. I remember somebody once said to me, when people give us a compliment, often we just receive it to hear. And they gave me this visualization of like actually seeing it go all the way in, and that's an interesting thing to play with, because I think it is easy to sometimes go, like, even as you're saying all these things about the songs, I can feel like, like, thank you, like it's nice to hear these things, but can I really like breathe into it and just like let it in? So I was just noticing that, and so thank you for sharing all that. That those are kind reflections, and yeah, I'd say kind of love was really born of that, of a very personal conversation, within myself around wanting to wanting to get to a place where, or wanting to come from a place where there was no longer any striving to do so that I could be worthy of the love that I wanted to experience. So just kind of being in one of those seasons of my life when I could really feel this familiar kind of slave driver in my consciousness that was like, you got to do more, you're not doing enough, you got to achieve more, you got to reach more people, and that sort of insatiable hunger, that hungry ghost that I think a lot of people can probably relate to. And I just started to ask myself the question, like, well, what would be enough when the end of my life came, to really be able to say, I've done enough, and that I can say that my life was well lived, and I can say that I really made the most of my time. And I realized that from that place that I was operating, it was nothing was ever going to be enough. And so I really needed to redefine the game that I was playing, from one about achievement and goals and, this result or this outcome or these numbers or this like impact, to the quality of the love that I was emanating in my beingness, in my day-to-day interactions. And I think those two things can go hand in hand. I think that drive and that hunger to, to create and to produce and to make an impact can be a beautiful thing, as long as it's not coming from this bottomless place of lack where we're essentially not feeling totally whole and connected to our wholeness, and we're going out and doing these things to try to establish our worth in the world. So
Yeah.
I'd say that inquiry, that deep inquiry, was really where I was at when kind of love just sort of came through. I just went to the piano and playing on some chords, and then as it kind of does, is something started to move through. That was what I needed in that moment, and that was the seed of inspiration for that song.
Really, really beautiful interweaving of your own circumstance and just connecting
Hmm.
that and bringing that to the surface through your vessel, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well,
that's
thank you
it
for
right
sharing.
there. That is why I play music. That is why I write music. Fundamentally, it is the medicine that I need. It is the way that I know to take my human experiences, and when there's heaviness or density or pain or suffering or struggle, and I don't know what else to do with that energy, if I can find my way to the blank page or to the guitar or to the piano, or find the will to use my voice in some way to allow something to move through, that can kind of take that energy of pain and make it into something beautiful to really alchemize, and that's that alchemy. That is really the essence of why I do what I do. And I think that's at the heart of what makes so much of the great art and creativity that we all love to receive. It's when somebody went through something and they took that experience and they harvested the gold in that experience, and then they infused that gold into a song or a piece of art, that then the next person could receive that and feel somehow more connected to that place in themselves, or feel somehow more held in some experience that they're going through, and less alone.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I feel when I listen to that song. Like, that's exactly the
Hmm.
common experience that we all have. We all think that sometimes in our toughest moments, we're alone in it. And then as we move on and eventually come out of it, we realize we're not. We're not the only ones who had to go to that dark place.
Hmm.
And it's, I guess, also culturally speaking, it's so important that we get to share this on a, almost like community level. And I think that's why also I find it really fascinating what you do, integrating your music into the medicine of holding space and healing, where I don't want to say that for the music industry, and I'm not an expert at all.
Hmm.
But what I would want to say is what I'm observing as a sort of broader thing happening in the world is this shift of consciousness, that people don't want to necessarily just be stuck in corporates anymore. They want to work, but like something
Hmm.
has to fundamentally change. And I believe that it's also happening in music. There's this almost like concept, yes, I do like that, but not like that.
Hmm.
The more conscious we become within ourselves, the higher the standard becomes
Yes.
of what we'll take and we won't take,
Yes.
especially in a space that we have to live together, and we want to create this in a sustainable way.
Yes.
And
100%.
so it's really nice to see that there's new ways emerging, and there's new ways of saying, I'm not necessarily going to create music because I want to have this career and I want to have success and I want to make money. It's almost like, let's just remove all these things. It's about, who am I outside of all that?
Mm.
What's the gift that I can give to everyone else that is not about how I measure up against someone else in the
Yeah.
industry and so
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
right?
that's a really beautiful framing. And I'll be honest, like I think that's been a big part of my journey, is really shedding those wants and needs, or at least the extent to which they taint the purity of what it is that I'm actually really wanting to allow to come through. And I think there is like a healthy balance. I do want my career and my offering to be um, regenerative and sustainable, and to provide, and to be, I want to be a stand and a demonstration for the fact that artists can thrive, artists can be, supported by giving their gift, that art has that value in the world. And I think, whether you're talking to somebody that's somewhere along their path, such as myself, or even you listen to some of the more prolific and really established figures like a Rick Rubin, and the message is the same, which is that it was never meant to be about that. That's something that happens as a byproduct. And when I say about that, I mean about trying to gain the approval of others, or trying to measure up in some way, or trying to achieve status or fame or whatever. It's about a spiritual practice. My creative path and my spiritual path are so deeply intertwined and interwoven. It's about a devotional offering, something that's really okay. We've been given the gift of this life. We've all been given this various set of gifts, whether it's the gift of sight or music or whatever it is, and to take those gifts and to create with them, and to share them in such a way that is really like just laying something on the altar of life, and saying thank you for the gift of this life, and then doing our best to detach from the outcome. That's like, I would be completely lying if I said that I didn't want people to hear my music, and I didn't want these creations that I pour my heart and soul into to reach as many people as possible. That is true. The the challenge, or the sort of the dance, is having that just like occupy its right place. There being a balance where that's not the predominant voice in my mind, especially when I'm creating. And thankfully, I don't have that problem, and I'm sure it's much, much more difficult when you have hundreds of thousands or millions of people waiting for your next creation to just like disregard how they're going to receive it. But even when something really beautiful has been created and you really love it and you really believe it, and then you go to share it, and to be completely detached, unattached from how it moves in the world, I haven't figured that one out yet. That's a work in progress for me. But the current solution that I've come to is just to keep creating, to just come back to the yoga mat of my spiritual practice, of my musical practice, to keep creating. And I'm doing that more than I ever have. In the past, I would put out an album and then I would kind of stop creating for a while, and I would kind of just wait for something to happen or wait for it to move in the world, and then get really frustrated that it wasn't happening fast enough. And now I put out these songs, which even the gap between recording them and releasing them has gotten a lot shorter. And the night before Receive came out, I was working on new music, and the day after Receive came out, I was working on new music. And for me, that's the win, because it's like just showing up, chop wood, carry water, and maybe these songs are gonna move in some way or another way. And that's actually, once I've created it and given it all the love that it deserves and then put it out into the world, I've done my job. The rest is not up to me. Like it's our job to steward our creations and to really steward them well, whatever that looks like, including, showing up on these platforms and sharing them if that's what we feel called to do. But beyond that, there's not much more we can do. And so my sanity and my sense of well-being lives in, okay, that creation happened. I created it. I brought it to life. I succeeded in doing that. I'm grateful that I got that gift, and I'm sharing it with the world, and so that it can find its way to whoever needs it or wants it or is going to resonate, and then keep going. Just stay in that flow, because that's actually the most fulfilling thing. I just wrote a song last Friday. A new song came through, and for me, the joy that I experience when that happens is greater than anything I could name around something that I've already created happening. Like that is the height of joy that I know. And it doesn't require anything of anyone. It's between me and the source. Just that I have access to that flow of inspiration alone. I'm saying this for the benefit of anyone who has a creative practice or creative flow. Like that's the gift. And then anything that happens after that is really the icing on the cake. And I'm saying this for my own reminding as well. It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you already answered your own question. How can I master being detached from the outcome? You probably know Byron Katie
I
and
do.
her work.
I
Yeah.
do, but I don't know. I haven't like dove deep into Byron Katie's work, but I know of her work, the work. I've heard of it.
There's one of the things that she refers to when it comes to approval seeking, and it's
Mm,
really about letting that go in a form where we don't expect anything to
mm-hmm,
come out of it. And
mm,
it is exactly in what you just said about doing it for you in the way it gives you joy, because the moment it comes through you and the giving is without attachment to any of the outcomes, but it's with the pure form of I'm doing that because I feel the joy while I do it.
yeah, yeah. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, I'm learning as I go, and I do have my days where I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I wish I was there, or I wish this was happening, or if only that would happen. But I also conceptually understand that when those things happen, it's not going to change anything fundamentally internally. And so it's a false pursuit of some out projected upon outcome, that when this happens we'll feel XYZ, and oftentimes that's not the case. And so if we know that, and we can save ourselves that disappointment by really just trying to digest that knowing, and operate as if it's not about that, that's not the main objective. So yeah, I'm on that path, and I'm really, my body of work has definitely been an offering in support of other people on that path as well, because I think that's a lot of what I've written about. And I've been on this journey of just following the inspiration, following my art, as I say, like following that nudge of where it takes me, and going on the journey of just becoming and evolving through that process, and harvesting lessons and learnings and insights along the way, and then just wanting to share those with other people, in the same way that so many of my inspirations and the teachers and the people that have just left little clues along the way for me have saved me so much heartache and pain and time too, because of their creations, their work that encapsulate these ideas and these teachings.
Who's your biggest teacher?
Biggest teacher. One of my biggest teachers, Julia Cameron, has definitely been a huge source of guidance and inspiration to me on my path. She's the author of The Artist's Way, which is her most well known work. And I was given that book when I was 27 by my first ever voice teacher. Or not first ever voice teacher who I loved. I had one voice teacher before that who was really mean and not so supportive. So I got that book at a really critical time on my creative path, and it just like opened up a whole world for me. And since then, I've always gravitated towards Julia's writing, and I've always found her books to just be a really beautiful companion on the creative path. So she's definitely been one of my biggest teachers. Yeah.
And what about personal teachers in your life?
Yeah, definitely. My dad has been a big teacher in my life. Both my parents, at different stages of my life. In my earlier sort of spiritual awakening time and earlier development, my father I really looked up to. He really demonstrated a commitment to his spiritual practice and his faith, and he was a really beautiful demonstration of that. And he was also really encouraging of me cultivating that in my own way when I started reading certain books, and he was like really open to me sharing those with him. And my dad is, he's got a lot of really powerful kind of like little sayings about life that he's often just said them in key moments, and they've really stuck with me. So yeah, definitely my dad and my mom as well. And my mom, especially in this last phase of, her getting sick and passing away, and the way that that really draws us closer, and the way that we get to know the people that we thought we knew on a whole other level, and hear how other people experienced her and how she touched and impacted so many people. I've learned so much, from my mom as well. And it's just even amplified things that she embodied and transmitted without necessarily me having been able to name them necessarily in the past. But now I can say, I'm really learning those things and practicing them in a whole new way in her honor, you know?
What are these things?
Well, um, my mom was very generous in her care of other people, and she was also very well known as somebody that had a lot of passion and would tell it like it is, and she wasn't afraid to say hard truths. She was like fiercely loving and compassionate and caring, but also fiercely honest and boldly authentic in her communication. So that's one example. And also that she was master in her craft, in her profession, in her field. She was a pioneer. She was so dedicated to her field of study, and she really broke the mold in a lot of ways. And she was so dedicated to her crafts, and she loved what she did, and she did it with so much care and passion. It was her art form, and yeah, it was really beautiful to really discover that aspect of, I knew she was incredibly gifted, and I knew she was really impactful in her field, and yet I, didn't quite get the degree to which she was like a legend to the people that she worked with, and that she really made a huge impact on her field of study, and also her students, and of course the people she served, her patients. That was a huge inspiration to me and continues to be in terms of legacy.
Yeah. So, what was your mom's profession?
She was a dermatologist, pathologist, and she really pioneered this field called dermatopathology, which was a sort of weaving of these two modalities or fields of study of skin pathologies and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to do the science of it justice, but yeah, she was a dermatologist and pathologist, and she worked with cancer patients, people with skin cancer, people with all kinds of skin afflictions. And she was also a professor and taught and had a residents who, she would take under her wing, and it was quite remarkable to really learn the extent to which she made her mark in her field. Yeah. Thank you for
Thank you
asking.
for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And with your mom's passing, do you mind going a bit into that? And can I ask, how was the grieving process for you?
Mm. Well, the grieving process is ongoing,
Yeah,
and I've spoken quite openly about this. It's been quite a liberating experience for me in a lot of ways because I have felt or I've carried grief for a long time, and in my culture, in my family, in my community, and I think in our general culture and society, grief is what I call the elephant in the room of the human experience. There's a way in which we all are susceptible to grief rather, and whether it's, the changing of the seasons that causes grief or the end of a relationship or the end of a chapter of life, grief is just so pervasive in our human experience. And yet, it's kind of almost taboo. It's kind of like not sexy. We don't really talk about it. We're not really taught. There's often a lack of demonstration in our elders, in our religious frameworks, in our schools, like how do you actually process this? How do you actually move this energy? And there's also a lack of spaces, less so now, more and more I think those spaces are popping up, but there typically has been a lack of spaces in our modern Western world where it's actually safe and the space is provided for people to really grieve in the way that they need to actually move this like depth of heavy energy that we need to process when we lose someone as significant as a parent or a loved one, a child, a beloved. And so when my mom got diagnosed with cancer, and when that was a huge confronting moment where that in and of itself brought a ton of grief on, because it's the grief of an idea or the loss of an idea of this is forever. It becomes essentially very instantly taken out from under you, and you're confronted with a reality like a diagnosis or the inevitability of someone's death. That brings up a lot of grief. And so from that moment, and especially as my mom's condition started to worsen, which happened relatively quickly and somewhat unexpectedly, despite the fact that she had a diagnosis of cancer, she had a rare she had a rare autoimmune response to the cancer, which really started to affect her in a very quick way. And I made a conscious choice when that was happening that I was going to lean into the discomfort of everything that was coming up so that I would not check out, so that I would not take distance from what was happening with my mom artificially and lose out on the opportunity to really be there with her. And I've said before, and I'll say again, I don't know a more powerful medicine or transformational agent than the medicine of grief. Grief has been this highly intelligent, highly precise, like alchemical enzyme that has had its way of finding the nooks and crevices in my being where some unprocessed something of the past, pain, sorrow, sadness, grief lived and needed to be felt. And if we say yes to it, it can be extremely liberating and heart opening, because essentially what grief is, as I understand it, is it's just an expression of the love that we have for the thing that we value and cherish. And so if we allow ourselves to feel that love, then we can stay in that pain, rather that loss, then we can stay in contact with the love that we have for whatever it is that we lost in some way or another. Maybe we lost it in physical form, and the way we can stay connected to it, one of the ways, is by really honoring it, by allowing ourselves to feel the depth of that love as expressed through grief. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the work of Francis Vella?
Yes, a friend of mine gifted me that book on the journey, and it was Francis Weller and Martin Prechtel, actually, who's a shaman. He's a Mayan shaman, actually, whose body of work, and one of his seminal talks is called Grief as Praise. And he talks about how in Mayan cultures, grief is really understood as in indigenous cultures, it's understood as a form of praise. And it takes a village to grieve properly. And it takes allowing ourselves to get really messy. And, he was saying how in these cultures, they actually have wailers. They have people whose job it is to wail, to really like vocalize in this very intense way, almost kind of like the haka. If you know, like the haka that they
Yeah.
have in New Zealand, it's like this really beautiful indigenous expression that's it's so intense, and it's so beautiful, and it's so moving, and it's like, when your mom dies, or when your father dies, or when your sibling dies, or when your child dies, like in a Western culture, we're so proper and we just kind of hold it all together. And it's like, okay, we're allowed to shed a tear, but like the appropriate expression would be like on your hands and knees, like just wailing because of the depth of connection and care and love that you feel for this person, and the honoring of this transition, this change of life. It's a sacred and really powerful unfolding. So yes, I do know of Francis Weller's work, but there were some really beautiful passages in there, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for going into that. I also found grief had been for me quite transformative as
Mm,
well. That's why I'm interested in asking these questions, because I know that many people shy away
yeah.
from
Yeah.
that depth and level of experience that you really get from being in that space and allowing it. And I also know people who have also lost their parents, and they have not allowed themselves to go. They have not invited grief in.
Yeah.
And I believe that could also be seen, to come back to your song, as another form of receiving,
Mm, wow.
right?
Yeah. I love that.
It's a form of allowing all of the experiences to come to the table, right?
Yes.
And with everything that within us comes up as well. And you even mentioned there was an earlier experience for you that came up at the same time that you learned your mom has cancer, so that grief becomes a portal for all of the separation within ourselves,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be really healing. It can really wash us clean if we let it, if we let it move through us. It really brought me and my mom closer. That first cracking open, there was, just old stuff, mental stories, grievances, and all of that got washed away. And all that was there was just this like profound, deep love and reverence. And I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to experience that while my mom was alive, and to experience that pure connection on the other side of that first sort of cleansing of the lens, and to share that with her. It was really beautiful.
Yeah. And after having experienced that, what out of that are you going to carry forward into your life? How is life different?
Well, certainly there's an idea that a lot of times we don't really see each other clearly. That's something I'm always kind of just reminding myself, like, am I really seeing that person? Am I seeing their goodness? Am I in some distortion? And, it's maybe somewhat cliche, but certainly just there is a definitely an amplified appreciation of the moments, just the preciousness of the moments, and this real understanding, like nothing is promised. There is no guarantee of tomorrow. I just shared something like hug your people, love up your people, like you never know. We don't get to, there's no guarantee, right? This isn't forever. So I think I'm living with a healthy, greater sense of urgency. And I've really been in this deep inquiry of legacy, and what is the legacy that I want to leave, and how does that inform, how I show up for my crafts, for my artistry, for my, offerings, And, Kind of Love was born out of that space, the recording anyway, not the song itself, but just the place that it's being shared from, and what I'm speaking about, all of it, being willing to be more bold in my expression, and even though I consider myself to be somebody that has been pretty outspoken and vocal and as authentic as I can be in a lot of ways, I see there are a lot of things I haven't spoken about, like this, for example, this is something that I'm finding a lot of fulfillment in speaking about. I feel like it's a way that I can really honor my mom and the gift that she gave me. And I know there's a lot of people that need to hear this because they're going through something similar and it's not being talked about. And also, I would say, yeah, just an understanding at times where in the past I would have not really known what was happening. There's more of a I have a deeper relationship with my grief. So when so it'll happen where I'll kind of be off a little bit, or I'll feel a little low, or there's some stuckness, and I'm like, well, what is it? What's happening? And then I'll be like, oh, it's grief. Like I remember, because it comes in waves. It really does. It's often said grief comes in waves, and yeah, I'll catch myself in these moments where I'm feeling something, and I remember it's grief, and then it's like, okay, let me create space for myself to really feel that. Or if I need to lean on somebody to create a little bit of a space for me to really lean into that space so that I can move some of that energy, or if it's available to go to the piano or go to the blank page and move some of that energy. So I think I'm getting much better at that. And I think that's really important for our health. I think that's a huge key that I've, you know, zoned in on, is that, like, when we don't process these things and when we keep them inside and when we don't vocalize, and it's a huge part of my work, that's how we get sick. And that's been part of my journey too. And my body has revealed to me at times, like, hey, there's something amiss here, and it always comes back to, where am I not expressing myself fully? What am I holding back? And for me, sadness and grief as a man especially has definitely been one of those expressions that have really been muted, and I've had to do a lot of work on my path to reclaim the permission to express that particular emotion or vibration or frequency.
Does that go along for you with receiving as well and asking for help and being in that sort of
Yeah.
vulnerable state?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that you keep bringing it back to that, because I think that's really like the edge for me, you know? That's an edge, and that's a muscle that we can develop over time, and I've been working that muscle, and yet there's definitely, room for more. And it was, just the other day, I was in a funk. I was in a funky place, and I'm in a men's group with like three other brothers, and we really have a space where that's welcome. And even then, sometimes it's hard to show up in that space and be like, "Hey, I need some help. I need some support." And so first it's like allowing ourselves to receive that, like somehow yesing that for ourselves. But then, yeah, being willing to reach out for support and let someone kind of like hold you up if you need, or hear you out if you need, or all of it, all the ways that we maybe want to be loved, want to be supported. It starts with us. It starts with us recognizing that within ourselves, and acknowledging the place where maybe we have judgment on that, or we're closed to that, or where we have some limitation on how willing we are to let that in. And then the next step of that is allowing that to flow towards us in some relational context. And that's uncomfortable, but that's also what the only way that we can actually allow ourselves to be nourished. Otherwise, we're going to go around half empty all the time, right? Trying to just do it alone, and I don't think we're meant to do it alone. Yeah.
You gave me a keyword. Nourishment.
Yes.
It's another thing I believe we don't talk enough about.
Mhm.
Nurture, it's something that we are
Yeah.
supposed to receive in the masses when we're a child, right? And I
Yes.
think that's where a lot of our wounds come from, because our parents are also just
Yes.
humans.
That's right.
So in the end, we do come out of that with a perceived lack whenever bridges are burned and they're not being repaired
Mhm.
in,
Yep.
in little moments.
Yes.
And then, especially, I guess, when it comes to, I can say that for myself, when it comes to the connection with my mother, there wasn't always room for nurture, which is
Mm.
fine because she was also a working mom, and it's something that I had to learn with time. But it's become, therefore, such a bigger thing in my life to pay attention to.
Yes.
When is it that I need nurture, and when is it I need that from other people, and when is it I actually need to create that for myself, and I need to not go in a space where I'm just in solitude, but I actually need to take care of certain aspects of my heart, my mind, my body, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a man, what is it like navigating that space?
That's an interesting question. It really requires us to develop a sense of our own internal father and mother. I think to really be nourished, like you said, it does come back to some version of how good that was modeled for us as children and how much we were able to receive the particular forms of nourishment and nurturing that we needed, which all our parents did our best, and probably most of the time it wasn't exactly what we needed. So the journey of really reclaiming that for ourselves in adulthood is getting into contact with what it is that we actually need, and what it is that would really fill our cup and nourish us, and what's the form of nurturing that we need, and then seeking that out, and then obviously, to the extent that we can, really giving that to ourselves first and foremost. But then of course some of it is definitely, it's relational connection, like you can only connect with yourself so much. We need connection with other people, physical touch. We can touch ourselves, but also that relational aspect. So for me, it's been definitely, there are certain aspects that are gendered, but I think at the end of the day, we both need a balance of that father energy and that mother energy. And in order to truly be nourished and nurtured, we have to have some internal representation of that can acknowledge and identify what we need, and then can somehow source that internally or go seek that and source it externally until our need is met. And yeah, I'm still learning. I'm learning how to, like making my own food. When my body's going through certain health challenges and I need to really be specific about what I'm eating. That to me is a form of like really cultivating that internal mother energy, that nurture. And when there's some really intense emotional thing happening and I need some solid container to really just hold me there and be just, fully wrapped in the arms of love, that feels like it's a bit more father energy. But sometimes maybe it's a bit of both. Or if I need to protect some aspect of myself from something that's I perceive as a threat or a danger, I need to set boundaries so that the more tender, vulnerable parts of me feel safe. That's definitely a great example, I would say, of like father energy. And so, yeah, I'm on this journey of discovering what those things are that I need to really feel nourished, and practicing giving those to myself and allowing myself to receive those in the best ways, in the most healthy, interdependent kind of ways, as opposed to, codependent kind of ways, or independent to a fault kind of ways.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, you have been quite on a journey to explore who you are and why you are the way you are, and
Yes.
where that all comes from. If for someone who is not that advanced in their journey and they are in a space where they don't know exactly how to go about getting nurture from the outside and being in that sort of vulnerable state,
Yeah.
it often can occur that there is a level of codependency, as you just said.
Hmm.
Were you on that in that place before,
Oh
where
yeah.
you were seeking that more from the outside than from yourself?
Yes.
And what did that look like?
That's a good question. That might require a little deeper reflection before I could just like answer it off the cuff. But I think, in relationship, it's very easy to see. I'm married. I've been with my wife for 9 years, and we've been on this journey of really addressing those codependencies and attempting to establish a healthier interdependence. And I think it's as simple as like there are moments where you're feeling some kind of way, and sometimes it's easier to just go and ask for the other person and just like hold you there, love you there. But if you're not really standing in that place of holding and loving yourself there, that can easily amount to codependency. And I think if you're in a conscious partnership where that mirroring is kind of woven in, oftentimes that's when it's not really going to be available. So you'll go and you'll seek the thing that you think you need, and your partner, because they actually love you from a higher capital L sense, they're not going to give you that in the way that that part of you needs it, because it would actually rob you of cultivating the healthy version of that within yourself. And I think that can happen in friendships. That can happen even in terms of that thing we were talking about earlier of like, if you're going out into the world with your gift and you want the world to give you something back in a way that's feeding some place in you where you're not really owning your value, chances are the world's not going to give that to you. And if it does, it's actually going to be to your detriment because it's developing an unhealthy codependency with a success or with your audience or with the people you serve, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, for the person who's just starting out on that journey, I think it's really simple. And we do this at the Nourish live stream. So if you want to come to a Nourish live stream, come. I do it once a
Thanks.
month on Inside Timer. It's free to join. And I always just start by inviting people to just tune in, like just get present with yourself, just close your eyes, breathe, and just notice how you're breathing and just feel where you're at, feel where your heart's at, and just ask yourself, like, what is it that I need in this moment? If we were going to spend a half hour together and go on a journey and you could call in anything in the spirit of whatever it was that was going to nourish you, what is it that you need? And just identifying that is a great place to start. Like, oh, I need to let something go, or I need some peace or some comfort, or I need love, or I need to forgive someone. Like just identifying that, then already the wheels are in motion. And then before you know it, it shows up in your reality. Somebody in your life shows up and then you're that much closer to being able to say, hey, can I have a hug? Or, can I share something? I'm going through something and I just need someone to lend an ear. And you're that much closer to being able to also, if it's something you can give to yourself, then I just identifying it as the first act of love, I think.
That's so powerful. I think that's really one of the missing links for so many people,
Yeah.
just to get into that space of clarity.
Yeah. 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 And I guess that's like it's like self-parenting. And if our parents just asked us like, "Hey, what do you need right now?"
Mm.
That's it. Cuz most of the time they were just trying to give us what they thought we needed based on their best guess, and we
Mhm.
probably didn't even know or weren't, but if we were taught how to ask that question from an early age, we could probably identify it a lot more easily. Yeah.
So it's good to make it a habit. And
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
do you ask yourself every day, what is it I need today?
I don't really ask the question so literally, but I think whenever I do my morning practice, that's just like kind of embedded in the process of just checking in and being like, hey, where am I at? What's going on? And yeah, what do I need? But I have friends who ask that question, and I tend to cultivated spaces in my life where that question is often asked, and my partner and I ask each other that question a lot. Yeah, I'd say it's getting to be something that I ask myself more regularly, whether it's really literally asking that question or just checking in. Like, what do I need right now? You know, what would really like help me out here? Yeah, what would move the needle for me, or what would help me feel more grounded, more at ease, whatever it is that I need? Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolute fantastic chat. Thank you so much for really deep diving with me and giving us the opportunity to get to know a bit more the person behind all the songs and the gifts that are out there
Mm,
that you've created, and just getting to know Chris Assad.
thank you.
And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting with you and appreciate the depth of your questions and your listening and your reflections as well. Yeah.